Hey there. Tonight we're taking a trip, way back, to the banks of the Nile. A place known for pyramids, pharaohs, and gods with animal heads. But beyond the grand temples and gold-lined tombs was a much harder truth. So here's the question: what would it be like to survive just one day in ancient Egypt? Heads up, this won't be the vacation you were expecting. Before we begin, tap like, hit subscribe if you love this kind of content, and tell me where you're watching from. It's always wild seeing this little time machine span the globe. Now dim the lights. Turn on a fan for the hum. Let's step into the past. Welcome to ancient Egypt, land of divine rulers, endless sand, and sunburn that counts as spiritual devotion. Before you even open your eyes, the sun is already baking your hut. No curtains. No breeze. No AC. Just a straw mat, a linen sheet that barely helps, and a desert sun doing its worst. The promised Nile breeze? Long gone. Probably died out sometime before 500 BC. By the time you crawl outside, it's already 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 degrees Celsius, and it's still early. Your linen tunic? Might as well be a paper napkin. Sunscreen? Forget it. Unless you're elite, your only defense is mud or crocodile dung. And even that's optimistic. Shade is a luxury. Trees are rare. Even the mud brick walls feel like heated stone. You're drenched in sweat before breakfast, and that's normal. You don't complain, though. Alright, the sun god is watching. And in Egypt, the hotter it gets, the more divine his presence. If you're melting, it's basically a blessing. Now, time to get clean. The Nile is nearby. And it stinks. Yes, it's the sacred river that sustains all life here. But up close, it smells like fish guts and wet moss got into a fight. Frogs hop around. Flies buzz. You bathe here. Everyone does. And there's no soap. Your spot treatment? Sand. Rub it into your skin. Rinse. Repeat. Nature's sandpaper. Washing clothes? That's done here too, by slapping fabric against rocks and hoping no crocodiles show up. Add in sewage runoff, animal waste, and the occasional floating corpse from upstream, and yeah, still cleaner than nothing. Back at home, breakfast awaits. And spoiler, there are no croissants. You sit on a stool, or just squat in a corner. Meal of the day? Bread. Thick. Dry. Gritty. Sometimes with actual sand, thanks to primitive milling stones. Protein? Not unless someone caught a fish. Maybe you'll get an onion. A few dates if you're lucky. And then there's the beer. Not bubbly. Not cold. It's warm, cloudy, thick, basically liquid bread. Everyone drinks it, even kids. Why? Because it's safer than water. Barely. No flavor, no fun. Just calories to keep you alive until your next dusty slice of bread and cup of mush. And now, it's time to work. If you thought ancient Egypt was about lounging under palms, think again. Unless you're royalty, a priest, or a scribe, you're not. Your life is manual labor from sunrise to sundown. Farmers? You're knee-deep in mud, planting and harvesting under the sun while being shouted at. Tools? Wood and stone. Your hands do the rest. Laborers? You're dragging multi-ton stones with ropes and prayer. Carving tombs? That's a full-time grind, for people who'll rest longer than you ever will. If you're a woman, you're not exempt. You grind grain, haul water, weave linen, care for kids, prep food, and work the fields. There are no breaks. Maybe 7 minutes when the baby naps. There's no clocking out. The sun sets. That's when your body collapses. And you'd better not complain. Because your boss isn't just a boss. He's the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh isn't just a king, he's a living god. Speaking against him? That's blasphemy. That's punishable. He's the reason the Nile floods, or not. The reason crops grow, or fail. His face is on statues, walls, even bread molds. You won't ever meet him. If you're lucky, you'll glimpse his golden boat once a year as it floats by. That's it. If you're chosen to work on a royal project, maybe a temple, a tomb, or a monument that scrapes the sky, you serve with pride. Or at least you say you do. Because in ancient Egypt, saying you're thrilled to carve stone from sunrise to sunset is a lot safer than admitting you're exhausted. And if the thought of protest crosses your mind, don't. Pharaohs didn't just silence dissent, they erased it. Entire villages have vanished for less. Literally. So yes, the Pharaoh is divine. And you? You're blessed to break a sweat in his honor. Back to work. Think the sun is bad? Meet your real enemy, sand. It's not just in your shoes. It is your shoes. Sand lives in your hair, your clothes, your food, and even your teeth. It doesn't matter where you are, field, market, temple, it finds you. One gust of wind and suddenly you're a walking exfoliation project. Your clothes don't help. Linen sounds nice, but in reality? It's like wrapping yourself in a napkin and expecting to stay clean in a dust storm. Sand sneaks under your tunic, clings to your sweat, and settles in every fold of skin like it pays rent. Trying to eat? That's a joke. Bread in Egypt isn't just chewy, it's crunchy in all the wrong ways. Grinding wheat between stone slabs adds grit to the flour, so you're basically chewing your way through a mineral deposit. Ancient dental records show worn-down molars flat as polished stones. Breakfast doubles as dental work. Your home? Not safe either. Mud brick walls have cracks and open windows without glass, inviting every stray breeze to redecorate your living room with sand. Your floors are dusty, your pots are gritty, and your bed? Think of it as a sandbox with a blanket. Shoes? Optional, if not outright rare. Most people walk barefoot, which means your feet are constantly under attack. If you're lucky enough to own sandals, they're probably made of woven reeds, great for the look, terrible for survival. Every step is a negotiation. And then come the sandstorms, swift, swirling chaos that turns the world into a blurry, gritty mess. One moment you're talking to a neighbor, the next you're choking on dust and squinting at outlines of people who were clearly visible seconds ago. Visibility drops to nothing, and your only real plan is to stand still and suffer. Sand, in short, is the uninvited roommate of your entire life. You eat it, breathe it, and probably dream about it. Washing it off? Good luck. Even the Nile can't save you. Half of it is sand anyway. Now let's talk gods. In Egypt, religion isn't a weekend habit, it's the rulebook of your entire existence. Everything from how you wake up to how you die is filtered through the divine. Temples line every city, each devoted to gods with very specific job descriptions. Ra drives the sun across the sky. Thoth oversees writing and time. Sobek rules the Nile with a crocodile's jaw. Badet, half cat, half deity, handles protection and possibly public relations. Your freedom doesn't exist. You start the day with prayers, offer part of every meal, and apologize for every small mistake, just in case one of the gods takes it personally. Spill water? Apologize. Stub your toe? Watch your mouth. Said God of Chaos might be listening. Death isn't an escape either. Dying means a whole new set of spiritual paperwork. Your heart is weighed against a feather. If it's heavy with sin, lying, cheating, maybe stealing a goat, Ammit, the devourer, eats it. Game over. No afterlife. Just deletion. But strangely, it's comforting. Egyptians believed in order, in cosmic justice. Live in truth, follow the rituals, respect Ma'at, the principle of balance, and you're rewarded with eternity, food, family, peace, and maybe a nice boat. Of course, money helps. Rich people get better tombs, more prayers, and greater spiritual security. Priests are powerful. Temples are massive. The poor? They hope their sincerity makes up for their lack of gold. Because in Egypt, faith isn't optional. You're about to be treated using a mix of ancient herbs, chants, and hope. Step 1? Find a healer. And honestly, for their time, Egyptian doctors were impressive. They had tools, medical texts, and a surprisingly detailed understanding of the human body. But here's the catch: medicine always came hand in hand with magic. Your remedy? A salve of honey, moldy bread, and crushed herbs. Honey kills bacteria, and mold has early antibiotic properties. So yes, it sort of works. But before applying anything, the healer recites a protective incantation, just in case your stomach ache is a cursed spirit's doing. Got a headache? Expect onion paste massaged into your scalp while someone hums a hymn. Chest pains? A poultice of cow dung and mashed dates, rubbed on with high hopes. Eye infection? Try lizard blood, ochre, and a splash of beer, with a prayer to Horus for good measure. Surgery? It happened. Abscesses were opened, bones were set, and linen was used as thread. No anesthesia, though. Just grit your teeth, scream into a brick pillow, and hope your friend can hold you still. Teeth? Not great. All that gritty bread has worn them flat by your mid-20s. If a tooth goes bad, you can either suffer, risk death, or let someone yank it out with metal tongs made by a guy who usually fixes carts. And wherever you go, there are amulets. Whether you're sneezing or giving birth, a charm gets hung around your neck, just in case the problem is a serpent ghost curled around your organs. So yes, there were real medical practices. But mostly, you'd better hope the gods like you, because your band-aid is a spell. Here's a twist. Women in ancient Egypt had more legal rights than many women in later civilizations. They could own land, run shops, get divorced, and take men to court. Impressive, right? But don't romanticize it just yet. If you're a woman, your life is non-stop. You wake before sunrise, grinding grain on a heavy stone that punishes your back. Then it's water from the river, cooking, cleaning, raising kids, feeding animals, and maybe farming. You are the full household engine. There's no leisure, no rest, and certainly no parental leave. Giving birth is dangerous. There's incense, chanting, and midwives, but no sterilization, no painkillers, and no soothing music. Linen clothes? Light and breathable. But you've got no shoes, no undergarments, and no escape from the heat or bugs. Flies swarm. The sun blisters. And sand finds every crease of your skin. Yes, there's makeup. But it's lead-based and applied with sticks that double as toothpicks. Stylish, but not exactly safe. If you're born into wealth, life looks different. You might be literate, manage accounts, or even serve as a priestess. Royal women like Hatshepsut and Cleopatra ruled with brilliance, and eyeliner sharp enough to cut glass. But if you're poor, the law may protect your name, but not your back. You labor, bleed, carry, and pray. You're not someone's property, but you're a prisoner to survival. Still, Egyptian women had power. They could testify in court, retain property after marriage, and pass inheritance to their kids. For the ancient world, that's revolutionary. So yes, there were rights. But comfort? That was for gods and granite statues, not for women elbow-deep in dough, swatting flies off a toddler in 110-degree heat. And when you finally collapse at night, don't expect peace. Because in Egypt, the biggest test begins after death. Your soul enters the afterlife, not for rest, but for judgment. A courtroom of 42 gods, and a scale weighing your heart against a feather. One lie, one stolen loaf, one wrong step, and your eternity could vanish. But that's a story for another time. If your heart was heavier than the feather of Maat, your journey ended right there. In ancient Egypt, this wasn't symbolic, it was final. Your soul had failed the test of truth. That's when Amit arrived. Part crocodile, part lion, part hippo, all nightmare. She didn't scold. She didn't forgive. She ate your soul. Gone forever. No afterlife. No second chance. And in a culture built around eternity, that was the worst fate imaginable. But it wasn't just your deeds that counted. Words mattered too. Say the wrong thing during judgment, forget a line from a sacred spell, and you're finished. It was like taking a divine oral exam where the penalty for failure was being devoured by a mythological beast. If you passed, you earned paradise, the field of reeds. An eternal, ideal version of Egypt. Gentle rivers, abundant crops, reunions with family, and peace. It was worth every ritual, every offering, every careful decision in life. That's why Egyptians invested in their tombs and filled their Book of the Dead with protective prayers and instructions. In a way, it was their afterlife insurance policy. But eternal peace had conditions. One mistake, one missed ritual, and you risked spiritual extinction. In life, however, there was at least one comfort: linen. Light, airy, and breathable, linen was the uniform of the Egyptian people. Whether you were farming, fishing, or worshipping, you wore it. Men typically wore short kilts or loincloths. Women wore long, straight dresses, some simple, others pleated or beaded if you had status. But for most people, your outfit was plain, well-worn, and hand-scrubbed in the Nile. Shoes? Optional. Most Egyptians walked barefoot. Sandals were a luxury, reserved for special occasions, priests, or the wealthy. So daily life meant hot sand and sharp pebbles underfoot. Jewelry and accessories weren't just for decoration. Amulets offered divine protection. Kohl eyeliner helped block sunlight and was believed to ward off eye infections. In Egypt, even beauty products served a purpose. But no matter how well you dressed, the insects didn't care. Flies, mosquitoes, gnats, they were constant. You'd spend your day swatting, sweating, and hoping your linen didn't stick to you like a damp towel before noon. And your wardrobe never changed with the seasons. Egypt had two, hot and hotter. That same linen outfit saw you through sun, sweat, storms, and labor. Speaking of labor, most Egyptians didn't make it past their 30s. If you survived childhood, you were considered an adult by age 13. Life came fast: marriage, work, childbirth, and a dozen ways to die: infections, fever, heat stroke, wild animals, even bad bread. Medicine existed, but it was limited. You got honey, herbs, spells, and a lot of hope. No antibiotics. No safety nets. Just you and the gods. But Egyptians didn't fear death. They prepared for it. The rich built tombs stocked with food, clothes, perfumes, and small servant statues called Shabbos meant to work for you in the afterlife. They were embalmed, wrapped in linen, and buried with the Book of the Dead, an ancient spiritual guide full of spells and passwords to help the soul pass safely through the underworld. The poor had simpler graves, shallow pits with little more than cloth wrappings and a handful of offerings. No gold, no inscriptions. Just the same hope, to reach the field of reeds. But even death offered no guarantee of peace. Tombs full of treasure became targets. Robbers chipped through stone walls, ignored divine curses, and stole the very items meant to bring a soul peace. Pharaohs tried to stop them, sealing tombs, hiding entrances, and engraving terrifying warnings. Curses like, "May your soul be eaten by fire serpents," or, "May your limbs twist forever in darkness." Spoiler: most thieves weren't deterred. Grave robbers came anyway. Under the cover of night, with knowledge passed in whispers. Some were villagers. Others were workers who had helped carve the very tombs they later plundered. Occasionally, even priests or guards were involved. The punishment if caught? Severe. Public beatings, mutilation, exile, or death. But the rewards? Worth the risk. Tombs were filled with treasures: gold, incense, fine oils, and linen that could be traded like currency. And the dead? They didn't resist. Even the poorest graves weren't safe. Commoners might be buried with bread, beer, or simple tools, still valuable in times of scarcity. Egypt faced famine, invasions, and collapse. Sometimes, grave robbing wasn't about greed. It was about survival. When your child is starving, offerings to the gods start to look like dinner. In ancient Egypt, even the dead had no guarantee of rest. Your tomb could be ransacked, your name erased, your body unwrapped by someone desperate enough to dig for food or sell your shroud. Rest in peace, only if no one knows where you're buried. We've all seen them, those strange, elegant carvings on temple walls. Eyes, birds, snakes, people walking sideways. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Mysterious, beautiful, and incredibly hard to read. They weren't art. They were language. A full writing system with over 700 characters. Some stood for sounds, others for full words. Many were determinatives, symbols used to clarify meanings in ways modern languages never had to. Forget punctuation. Forget vowels. Hieroglyphs were written in any direction, left to right, right to left, even top to bottom. Your best clue? Look at which way the animals face. That's your reading direction. If they're upside down, you're in trouble. Reading hieroglyphs wasn't for the average person. Literacy was reserved for scribes, a small, elite class trained from childhood. Years of memorization, repetition, scroll copying, and hand cramping went into mastering the script. But being a scribe came with status. They recorded laws, managed taxes, wrote sacred texts, and avoided backbreaking labor. In a world where knowledge meant control, scribes held power, quietly and permanently. To everyone else, writing was sacred. Names carved in stone preserved the soul. Erasing one? That was spiritual murder. Hieroglyphs weren't just symbols, they were spells, infused with divine weight. Misspelling wasn't a typo, it could be a curse. So, after everything, sun, sand, sweat, sacred ritual, one question remains: would you survive a day in ancient Egypt? Honestly? Probably not. It's easy to imagine golden temples and perfumed air, but the reality was harsh. Life began on a dirt floor, often barefoot, in relentless heat. You cooked over open fire, walked miles for water, worked till your back gave out, and feared snakes in your bedroll. You had no toothpaste, no privacy, no medicine. If you were lucky, you owned 2 linen wraps and didn't catch a fever or an infection. If you did, you got herbs, prayers, and hope. No guarantees. You served a god-king who could take your land without question. You lived in a world where even the afterlife came with paperwork. You'd be judged, your heart weighed, and your soul risked, just to reach peace. And yet, they weren't miserable. Egyptians believed deeply in life, in love, in eternity. They had music, laughter, festivals. They worshipped beauty, celebrated family, and built things meant to last forever. And they did. Because here we are, still telling their stories. And just beyond Egypt, another world waits. At the heart of ancient Teotihuacan, a pyramid still stands, its stone face crawling with open-mouthed serpents, frozen mid-lunge, eyes watching. This is the temple of the feathered serpent. Not a place of peace. A place of warning. Of power. The carvings weren't decoration, they were teeth. And under their gaze, something terrifying once happened. Recent excavations beneath the temple of the feathered serpent have uncovered something unexpected, something far more chilling than ritual offerings or carved stone. Archaeologists discovered the remains of over 200 individuals. Many were young men, their bodies deliberately arranged, hands tied behind their backs, several beheaded. These weren't random burials. They were sacrifices. Some were found with obsidian knives, others adorned with necklaces made of human teeth or jewelry carved from jawbones. Their bodies were positioned in ways that spoke to ritual meaning, not chaos. This wasn't a grave, it was a message, a declaration sealed in blood. What kind of belief system demands such horror? What gods required this price? The temple of the feathered serpent wasn't simply a place of worship. It was a stage where power, religion, and fear intertwined. Rulers used these sacrifices to legitimize their reign, to show they could maintain cosmic balance through blood. In a city of over 100,000 people, control wasn't maintained through laws alone. It was burned into stone and offered to the heavens. Stand before the temple today and you're not looking at mere ruins. You're facing a civilization that believed gods needed blood, and they had the right to deliver it. But who were these people? Before the rise of the Maya, before the mighty Aztec Empire, there stood a city that defied categorization, Teotihuacan. A name given later by the Aztecs, meaning the place where gods were born. Walk the Avenue of the Dead, and you'll understand. At its peak between 100 and 250 C, Teotihuacan was one of the largest cities on Earth. With over 100,000 residents, it rivaled ancient Rome, Alexandria, and Chang'an. Its streets were meticulously planned. Its structures built with volcanic stone. Its neighborhoods were organized into apartment compounds, designed for entire extended families. At the city's heart stood three enormous pyramids: the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. And yet, no one knows who built it. There are no inscriptions, no rulers' names, no surviving written records. We don't even know what these people called themselves. Teotihuacan was likely ruled not by a single monarch, but perhaps by a council or theocratic order. A system lost to time. But its reach was undeniable. Artifacts from Teotihuacan have been found in Maya cities like Tikal and Copan, and even in the Zapotec capital of Monte Alban. Their obsidian blades, ceramic styles, and murals appear across Mesoamerica. In one case, evidence suggests Teotihuacan emissaries helped replace a Maya king with someone more aligned to their interests. How did a city with no known writing system wield such influence? The answer may lie in their temples. These weren't just shrines, they were instruments of power. Aligned with the cosmos, they acted as astronomical tools, ceremonial stages, and public propaganda. They were proof that Teotihuacan was the center of the universe, a place where time, blood, and divinity met. At the core of it all was the feathered serpent. Known later as Quetzalcoatl to the Aztecs and Kukulkan to the Maya, this god was already worshipped here centuries earlier. But what kind of deity is both bird and snake? Snakes crawl through the earth, shedding skin, symbols of rebirth, death, and transformation. Birds soar skyward, bringing wind and sun. The feathered serpent was both life and death, heaven and underworld, chaos and order. Carved across the temple are his forms: plumed crests, goggle eyes, open jaws. Some say they represent the god. Others say they're rulers dressed in his likeness. Either way, he's everywhere. And under his gaze, the blood flowed. Because this god, this hybrid of opposites, wasn't only a symbol of cosmic balance, he was its enforcer. Blood wasn't metaphorical in Teotihuacan. It was essential. Sacred. The energy that powered the very rhythm of the cosmos. And while later civilizations would remember Quetzalcoatl as a gentle deity of knowledge and wind, his role in Teotihuacan was far more complex, and far more terrifying. He demanded offerings, not just of crops or incense, but of life itself. In ancient myths, Quetzalcoatl descends into the underworld to retrieve the bones of ancient people and create humankind. But that act of creation came at a cost. The gods gave their lives to set the world in motion, and in return, humans were expected to make sacrifices of their own. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent wasn't just a monument to divinity. It was a cosmic engine, linking sky, earth, and the underworld through ritual. Every carved serpent, every stone slab, Every buried victim was part of that sacred machinery. Teotihuacan didn't simply honor the feathered serpent. They embodied him, his paradoxes, his duality, his power. For centuries, the temple stood silent, covered in dust and legend. Towering, weathered, and mysterious. Locals told stories. Scholars guessed. But no one imagined what lay beneath until the late 20th century, when archaeologists began to dig, and found horror preserved in stone. Beneath the temple, they unearthed sealed chambers and ritual pits, each one filled with human remains. Over 200 individuals. Mostly young men. Most with their hands tied behind their backs. Some decapitated. Many laid with obsidian blades beside them, blades never used in war, only in ceremony. These were not random deaths. They were precise, intentional, sacred. The bodies were arranged in geometric patterns, aligned with the cardinal directions. Numbers, placement, symmetry, every detail was symbolic. These weren't victims of violence. They were components in a ritual equation. Surrounding them were offerings, jaguar bones, snakes, rare shells from distant coasts, figurines, and ritual tools. These young men may have been warriors, selected to die not as punishment, but as divine participants. To die for the gods was the highest offering of all. And the deeper archaeologists dug, the more sacrifice they uncovered. In one sealed tunnel, they found shimmering mercury and walls lined with mica and pyrite. The chamber glowed like starlight. It was as if the builders had recreated the night sky underground, perhaps a passage into the underworld, or a path toward rebirth. This temple was not built over death, it was built with it. Even its alignment speaks to celestial purpose. Teotihuacan's Avenue of the Dead runs 15 degrees off true north, not by accident, but by design. The temple aligns with astronomical events, the equinox sunrise, perhaps, or the movements of Venus, a planet tied to war, sacrifice, and rebirth. Every step of the temple reflects cosmic intention. The number 7, representing the classical celestial bodies, echoes in its architecture. The temple wasn't only a place of worship. It was a tool of timekeeping, agriculture, and divine conversation. And beneath it, the secrets only grew darker. In 2003, researchers uncovered a tunnel beneath the temple, a deliberately constructed space, with mirrored walls and flowing mercury. It wasn't just a structure. It was a message. A ritual space designed to simulate the heavens themselves. To enter it was to walk through the Milky Way. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent wasn't just a sacred site. It was a machine that tied sacrifice to the stars. To the people of Teotihuacan, time was circular. Life, death, rebirth, each act repeated, fueling the universe. This wasn't just architecture. It was a cosmic declaration. And every stone, every carving, every drop of blood was part of the conversation between earth and sky. Imagine arriving at Teotihuacan nearly 1,800 years ago. You've journeyed from a smaller city-state, and as you walk the Avenue of the Dead, the sheer magnitude of the city overwhelms you. But when you approach the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, you stop cold. Stone serpents jut from the walls, eyes wide, fangs bared in eternal threat. Carvings of jaguars snarl from the stone. The plaza is vast. Once thousands gathered here, not just to celebrate, but to watch. And what they watched was terrifying. A ritual sacrifice, maybe? a display of power. Teotihuacan's rulers knew fear was as important as faith. Public executions weren't chaos, they were strategy. Wrapped in cosmic symbols, performed beneath serpent gaze, these sacrifices were a message: the gods are with us, and we will feed them what they demand. But this wasn't violence for its own sake, it was ritual theater. Priests in elaborate feathers and obsidian masks moved like spirits. They chanted, danced, and offered blood. These were not just ceremonies. They were political statements. Teotihuacan's leaders claimed divine favor. They could speak to the gods, bring rain, summon blessings, or destruction. Even the architecture served the story. From high atop the temple, the elite looked down on the crowd. The people looked up, not just at their rulers, but at the gods and the sacrifices. It reinforced order. A hierarchy set in stone. Teotihuacan didn't expand with armies. It conquered with awe. Foreign visitors left with stories of serpent temples, endless avenues, fire-lit rituals. It wasn't just a city. It was a divine broadcast. And the temple of the feathered serpent was the loudest voice. At its height, Teotihuacan pulsed with life, culture, and ambition. But around 550 C, that pulse began to fade. It wasn't sudden, at first. Droughts came. Harvests failed. Systems that held cosmic balance, religion, government, order, began to crack. Then the fire arrived. Burned temples. Charred elite housing. Even the temple of the feathered serpent shows evidence of intentional destruction. But curiously, the lower neighborhoods were spared. This wasn't an invasion. It was rebellion. The same people who once stood in awe rose up. They defaced the serpent heads, set fire to the sanctuaries, desecrated the rituals. Then silence. Teotihuacan slowly emptied. Trade routes dissolved. Art stopped. The gods were no longer fed. The rulers vanished. The temple, once the city's voice, fell quiet. And yet, its legend survived. Centuries later, the Aztecs found its ruins. Awed by its scale, they believed the gods had built it. They named it Teotihuacan, the place where gods were born. They wove it into their own mythology, unaware of who truly raised its stone. To them, the temple of the feathered serpent wasn't a ruin. It was sacred memory. But Teotihuacan left no final message. No written history. Just broken stone and unanswered questions. For over 1,000 years, the temple slept beneath ash and soil. Then came the archaeologists. In the 20th century, they unearthed the city. By the 1980s and 2000s, the temple revealed its darkest truths. In 2011, they broke into a sealed tunnel under the temple. It had been closed for over 800 years. What they found was not a tomb, it was a cosmos. A tunnel lined with pyrite to mimic stars. Pools of liquid mercury. Jade figures, obsidian knives, carved masks, thousands of offerings. Some say it was a place for initiation. Others think it symbolized the world's creation, a womb of gods and kings. The serpent hadn't vanished. It had coiled inward into the temple's core. And as each artifact rises from the dust, each jawbone, each statue, we get closer to understanding the message left behind. A message whispered not in words, but in blood, stone, and shadow. Despite all our scientific tools, X-rays, drones, and radar that can see beneath the ground. One thing remains true: the temple of the feathered serpent still guards its mysteries. Today, this ancient temple doesn't just represent a lost civilization, it's a monument to a mindset that fused divine power, cosmic order, and death into one inseparable belief system. Tourists visit and snap photos. Children race past its sculpted serpent heads. But beneath their feet lies sacred ground, filled with untold stories and over 200 known human sacrifices. And yet the temple survives. Its significance is not only physical, it's psychological, spiritual, and cultural. The feathered serpent, a god embodying both sky and earth, never faded from memory. The Toltecs adopted him. The Aztecs transformed him into Quetzalcoatl, the wise deity who brought knowledge and compassion, who shed tears for humanity, and who promised to return. This evolution proves that myths don't vanish, they adapt. In modern Mexico, echoes of the feathered serpent live on in murals, sculpture, and poetry. His face appears on currency, stamps, and official buildings. He represents not only ancient power but a deep national identity. But the temple's legacy isn't only about glory, it also forces us to confront a more difficult truth: the cost of devotion. It raises unsettling questions. How far will people go to feel close to the divine? What happens when religion becomes a tool for control? Can beauty and brutality truly exist side by side? The temple of the feathered serpent isn't just a ruin, it's a mirror. It reflects our hunger for meaning, our reverence for life beyond death, and our ability to create awe-inspiring structures while hiding violence in the foundations. It teaches us that greatness is often built on contradiction. That civilizations can rise to astonishing heights while burying painful secrets under their stones. Perhaps this is why we continue to return, not just to admire, but to search. Because somewhere deep down, we know the serpent is still watching. Not to strike, but to remind. To remind us who we were, and who we could become. Before there were words, there was rhythm. Tens of thousands of years ago, before writing or even spoken language, our ancestors began to make intentional sound, beats created by hands on bark, sticks on stone, or feet on packed earth. And from those simple, repeating patterns came something powerful: the first drumbeat. It wasn't called music, but it felt alive, like emotion given shape, like communication without words. Evidence of early percussion dates back more than 30,000 years. These drums were simple, carved from tree trunks, shaped from gourds, covered in stretched hides. They weren't built to impress, they were made to connect. Imagine a forest where a distant drumbeat signals warning or celebration, where rhythm pulls a scattered tribe together. These drums weren't objects, they were voices. They spoke in beats when words didn't yet exist. Drumming wasn't something you watched, it was something you joined. Around fires, under stars, inside caves where echoes turned sound into ceremony, rhythm gave meaning to moments. All over the world, people found ways to mark time with sound. Rhythm was our first shared language, a pulse that unified. In Africa, the gem drum held spiritual power. Each one was believed to contain 3 souls: the tree it came from, the animal whose hide gave it voice, and the artisan who made it. Played in circles, the drum wasn't just part of ritual, it was the ritual. Some African drums could even mimic human speech. In West Africa, talking drums carried messages across great distances, announcing births, deaths, or danger. Long before the telephone, we drummed our truths across the land. For Native Americans, the drum was sacred, a heartbeat of the earth itself. It summoned healing, honored the ancestors, and guided the dead toward peace. The great powwow drum wasn't just played, it was felt. A circle of drummers created a living pulse, a heartbeat that connected people to land, to sky, and to spirit. In Australia, Aboriginal groups used clapsticks and rhythmic stomping during Dreamtime rituals, echoing creation stories in every step. Far to the north, Inuit shamans used circular drums to slip into trance, seeking visions amid endless winter darkness. These were no performances. They were sacred ceremonies. Every beat was a lifeline to the past, to memory, to belonging. The drum was not a solo act, it was communal magic. In every culture, the circle brought people together, bodies swaying, hands striking, souls stirring. No need for sheet music or spotlights. Rhythm was the only guide. Across ancient lands, hearing a drum meant something important was happening. Something holy. Something human. From ritual fires to battlegrounds, the drum has always spoken. Sometimes as comfort. Sometimes as command. As civilizations grew, the drum became more than spiritual, it became strategic. The earliest armies didn't use megaphones. They used thunder. In ancient China, massive bow drums signaled battlefield moves, charge, retreat, regroup, all encoded in deep, booming rhythm. In Mesopotamia, temple drums could both summon gods and warn citizens, shaking stone walls with their power. Rome brought its own percussion. The tympanum, used in religious and civic rites, was less tactical, but no less symbolic. Its beat told all, Rome reigns. But perhaps the most fearsome war drummers were the Ottomans. Their Mater bands, history's first organized military orchestras, preceded the army into battle. Coasts and davils thundered through valleys, joined by cymbals and horns in a wave of sonic intimidation. Sometimes enemies broke before battle even began, defeated not by steel, but by sound. Drums didn't just conquer. They crowned. In royal courts, drums announced rulers, marked great events, and echoed in palaces across Asia, Africa, and Europe. Every beat proclaimed, power is present. Even in the darkest corners of history, enslaved people used rhythm as resistance. Forbidden drums still found a voice. They preserved culture, coordinated uprising, and whispered defiance. The drum was survival. Wherever it was struck, on palace steps or plantation fields, the drum spoke of authority. It kept time, marked territory, and reminded everyone who held control. Throughout the Americas, indigenous peoples have long turned to the drum as a sacred tool during vision quests, purification lodges, and healing ceremonies. Its steady, repetitive beat mirrors the primal sound of the womb, a pulse that calms the body and opens the spirit. In these moments, the drum is not just a companion to prayer. It is the prayer, a rhythmic lifeline to ancestors and unseen realms. Even within Christianity, where structured worship once left little space for percussion, the drum found its sacred footing. In African American gospel traditions, drums carried the congregation through joy and struggle. Behind the soaring choirs and impassioned sermons was always the heartbeat of faith, a rhythm that held the pain of the past and the hope of deliverance. In every major faith and ritual practice, the drum does more than mark time. It channels it. It becomes a vessel for intention, a spiritual current that flows where words no longer suffice. Because when the voice falters, rhythm carries on, and something divine always answers. For most of history, the drum was a solitary voice. One player, one sound, one story. But as the industrial age unfolded, that changed. In dance halls, theaters, and jazz clubs, percussion was transformed. By the early 20th century, musicians weren't just playing individual drums. They were creating an entirely new instrument, the drum kit. Born out of practical constraints, the kit was innovation through necessity. Space was limited. Budgets were tight. So drummers began combining pieces, bass, snare, cymbals, into a single, playable setup. In 1909, the invention of the foot pedal for the bass drum changed everything, allowing drummers to expand their range and complexity. From there, evolution was rapid. Hi-hats, toms, cowbells, and crash cymbals joined the ensemble. One person could now sound like a full rhythm section. And from this ingenuity rose a throne, not of royalty, but of rhythm. Then came jazz. In the smoky clubs of New Orleans and beyond, the drum kit found its soul. Jazz drummers broke the mold. They didn't just keep time, they bent it. Through improvisation, syncopation, and emotional nuance, legends like Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich turned percussion into poetry. As rock and roll took the stage, the kit became a beast. Bigger, louder, more explosive. The 60s and 70s saw massive kits with double bass pedals, walls of toms, and cymbals that roared. Drummers like Keith Moon and John Bonham led with power and precision. They weren't background players, they were the heartbeat. Today, the drum kit is everywhere. In churches, stadiums, studios, and street corners. And though digital drums and machines continue to rise, nothing replaces the visceral joy of hitting a real skin, feeling the vibration under your feet, and knowing you're part of something ancient and alive. But the world doesn't beat to just one drum. Across continents, cultures have shaped their own percussive voices, each unique, yet universally human. In West Africa, the gem sings in conversation, its highs and lows forming a language of community and spirit. The Dunan grounds it, offering depth and stability. In the Middle East, the darbuka speaks with elegance, quick, crisp, and commanding. In the Caribbean and Latin America, congas, bongos, and timbales echoed the fusion of African, indigenous, and European legacies. In Cuba, the bata drums carry sacred Yoruba stories. In Brazil, samba pulses through the surdo, the cuica, and the crowd. In India, drumming becomes poetry. The tabla and mridangam speak in syllables, with rhythms so precise they feel melodic. Each strike is a coded phrase, each rhythm a meditation. And then there's the frame drum, arguably the oldest. From Persian mysticism to Celtic song, it appears everywhere. One drum. One skin. Infinite voice. Each drum, no matter how it's made or where it's played, holds the story of its people. Their joys. Their rituals. Their resistance. Today, anyone with a laptop and a beat pad can craft rhythms once made by entire orchestras. Ancient grooves from Africa, Asia, and the Americas are being sampled, remixed, and reborn on digital dance floors. The tools have changed, wooden sticks replaced by MIDI pads, skins by sensors, but the purpose remains unchanged: to move bodies, to mark time, to make silence speak. Across generations, civilizations, and empires, one voice has never fallen silent: the drum. It has been our companion since the beginning, from sacred fires to stadiums, from temple floors to subway walls. Because the drum is more than an instrument. It's a connection, to memory, to spirit, to one another. Before we spoke in sentences, we listened to rhythm. Before we walked, we floated in wombs, listening to the soft, steady pulse of our mother's heart. That beat, the first music we ever heard, never leaves us. We spend our lives chasing it. Through joy and mourning, war and celebration, the drum becomes our voice when words fall short. It has marched with kings, echoed in protests, rumbled beneath cathedrals, and rallied crowds in arenas. It has no language, yet speaks to all. Because rhythm isn't just heard. It's felt, in the bones, in the breath, in the blood. Even as percussion continues to evolve, from hand pans on street corners to digital kits in virtual studios, its essence remains deeply human. Drumming doesn't just involve skill, it demands soul. No AI can mimic the subtle imperfections of a hand striking hide with intention. Rhythm isn't math, it's memory. It's emotion. It's life. And that is why the drum outlasts trends, outlives empires, and outshines machines. Because it taps into something older than history and deeper than language, our need to belong, to express, to remember. Just like the cities we build. Like Manhattan. Before the skyline became a sea of glass and steel, Manhattan was a low, rugged sprawl. In the early 1800s, the tallest structures were church steeples. Gravity ruled the streets, limiting buildings to 5 or 6 stories. Ambition was there, but stone and brick had their limits. Higher meant heavier. Heavier meant expensive. So New York grew outward, not upward. Beneath its dirt roads and wooden frames, however, was something powerful, Manhattan's bedrock, deep, dense, unshakable. Waiting. Everything changed in the mid-1800s. First, the elevator. In 1852, Elisha Otis demonstrated a device that could safely lift people, suspending them high in the air without the fear of falling. Suddenly, top floors became desirable. Status was measured by height. Cities began to think vertically. Then came the steel frame. No more thick masonry walls holding everything up. With steel, buildings could climb with freedom, their weight distributed across skeletons rather than stone. The ground was no longer a limit, it was a launch pad. Manhattan had the geology, the economy, and the hunger. With steel and elevators, architects reached for the sky. Banks and newspapers wanted their names seen from miles away. The competition was no longer for land, but for air. These innovations didn't just transform construction. They redefined what a city could be. And so, the race upward began, not just to house people, but to claim identity, to express power, to touch the clouds. The drum and the skyline, two human creations born of necessity and elevated by imagination. One speaks in rhythm, the other in steel. But both tell us the same thing: we are here. We are alive. We are reaching. And we will not be silent. By the late 19th century, New York City was no longer satisfied with expanding outward. It dreamed of reaching the sky. The streets were crowded, the land was finite, and the only logical direction left was up. With the elevator now proven and steel frame construction becoming standard, Manhattan became a vertical battlefield where ambition was measured in stories. The first real shots in this height race were fired in the 1890s. The New York World Building, completed in 1890 as the home of Joseph Pulitzer's newspaper empire, climbed 20 stories into the sky. It was the tallest office building in the world, at least for a short while. In 1899, the Park Row Building took the title, topping out at 391 feet. These towers weren't just architectural achievements. They were declarations of power, vision, and belief in the city's future. To build high was to proclaim relevance, innovation, and dominance. Skyscrapers soon began to multiply across the skyline. The Singer Building, completed in 1908, reached 612 feet and became the tallest building in the world, finally dethroning Trinity Church's spire, which had ruled the skyline for more than 50 years. But the triumph was fleeting. Just 5 years later, the Woolworth Building soared even higher. Designed by architect Cass Gilbert and financed entirely in cash by retail magnate Frank Woolworth, the Woolworth Building rose 792 feet and 55 stories. Its neo-Gothic design earned it the nickname Cathedral of Commerce, blending ecclesiastical grandeur with corporate ambition. It wasn't just a building, it was a sermon about American potential and prosperity. But this was more than architectural competition. It was branding in steel and stone. Corporations and institutions scrambled to erect taller, more distinctive structures, giant signatures etched into the skyline. Each tower was a billboard, each spire a spotlight. The silhouette of Manhattan became a theater of identity, advertising success not just with logos, but with gravity-defying geometry. Below it all, progress roared. Steam shovels bit into Manhattan's granite bones. Ironworkers balanced on narrow beams, hundreds of feet in the air, with nothing but resolve and calloused hands. Skyscrapers became physical poems to labor, industry, and determination. The 1920s added a new rhythm, style. This was the era of Art Deco, a design movement that wrapped steel and stone in elegance. Height was no longer enough, beauty mattered too. Buildings danced with curves, chevrons, and chrome. The Chrysler Building, completed in 1930, epitomized this fusion of grace and ambition. With its stainless steel crown, hidden spire, and ornamentation inspired by automobile design, it didn't just scrape the sky, it seduced it. But the triumph was brief. In 1931, the Empire State Building claimed the crown, rising 250 feet. Built in just over a year during the depths of the Great Depression, it wasn't just a record breaker, it was a statement: New York endures. America aspires. Even in hard times, we reach higher. By the 1930s, Manhattan's skyline had matured. It was no longer just a collection of buildings. It was a monument to ambition, a vertical manifesto of human possibility. And the race, though far from over, had proven one thing beyond doubt. In New York, the sky is never the limit. By the late 1960s, New York's skyline was already iconic, but the city wasn't done reaching higher. At the southern tip of Manhattan, a bold new vision emerged: two towers that would forever change how the world saw the city. These were the twin towers of the World Trade Center, symbols of ambition, unity, and a rapidly globalizing economy. Designed by architect Minoru Yamasaki and built under the direction of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, The towers were striking in their simplicity. Clean vertical lines, aluminum cladding, and no decorative setbacks. Each tower would climb to over 1,600 feet, becoming the tallest buildings in the world at the time. Construction began in 1966. To make way, entire neighborhoods like Radio Row were cleared. The project also introduced groundbreaking engineering, the slurry wall technique, which allowed foundations to be dug deep into the soft riverbed without flooding. By 1973, the Twin Towers stood completed, bold, controversial, and undeniably powerful. They didn't charm like the Chrysler Building or taper like the Empire State. They stood solid, side by side, symbols of strength and certainty. Some critics called them bland. Others called them brilliant. But to most, they became inseparable from the identity of New York. For nearly 3 decades, the Twin Towers defined Lower Manhattan. Visitors came for the views, locals worked within their walls, and the skyline became instantly recognizable, framed by the symmetry of those twin spires. Then came September 11, 2001. In just hours, the towers were gone, reduced to dust and twisted steel. Thousands of lives lost. A nation shaken. What had been symbols of commerce became symbols of grief. In the aftermath, Ground Zero was not just a construction site, it was sacred ground. A place of memory, of mourning, of collective pain. But even in tragedy, New York did what it always does, it began to rebuild. Years of debate followed. How should we honor the past while looking to the future? The answer came slowly, carefully. One World Trade Center would rise in their place, not a replica, but a beacon. At 1,776 feet, it was designed not just for height, but for meaning. The new skyline wasn't just about ambition anymore. It was about resilience. A silhouette reborn from sorrow, built not to forget, but to remember. Construction on One World Trade Center began in 2006. By 2014, it opened its doors, rising not as a replica of what was lost, but as a symbol of reflection. Its glass facade shifts with the sky, sometimes glowing, sometimes disappearing into the clouds. It doesn't shout for attention, it simply stands. Next to it, the 9/11 Memorial opened in 2011. 2 vast voids now mark where the Twin Towers once stood, with waterfalls cascading endlessly and the names of the victims etched in bronze. This isn't just architecture, it's memory carved into the landscape. The site evolved slowly. New towers followed: 3 WTC, 4 WTC, 7 WTC, each modern, refined, and designed with purpose. Together, they tell a story not just of rebuilding, but of transformation. New York chose not to replicate the past, but to rise with grace and resilience. Today, Manhattan's skyline is more than steel and glass, it's a living symbol. It speaks of ambition and reinvention. Its outline is instantly recognizable, not for any single building, but for what the whole city stands for. It tells a story of dreamers, workers, visionaries, of risk, tragedy, and triumph. And the skyline keeps changing. In Midtown, new towers stretch the limits of engineering. Along Billionaires Row, pencil-thin giants like 432 Park Avenue and Central Park Tower pierce the sky, monuments to wealth and modern ingenuity. In Hudson Yards, an entirely new district has emerged, transforming former rail yards into a futuristic neighborhood of glass towers, art, and commerce. But while the skyline moves forward, it never forgets. The Empire State still shines. The Chrysler Building still reflects morning light. One World Trade Center stands tall as both a tribute and a promise. This city builds not just to grow, but to remember, to dream, to begin again. The skyline doesn't simply trace the edge of a city. It marks the beginning of its spirit. In Manhattan, the sky is never the limit. It's always the next invitation.